Welcome to Nasdaq TradeTalks. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq. Joining us at the MarketSite studio, we have Nick Romito. He's the CEO of VTS, and we're going to discuss the technology sector and its role within the real estate industry. Nick, it's great to have you with us. Welcome to TradeTalks.
Thanks for having me. Good to be here.
You got it. And how has the real estate's relationship, how has it evolved when it comes to working with the tech industry over the past decade, and what's the state of the relationship today?
So I think real estate is probably one of the late great laggards of tech overall. However, I think while the pandemic was tough in a lot of ways, it probably represented the most progress we've had in terms of tech in real estate from the 20 years prior. And so it's kind of become the golden age of real estate tech, and that's a good thing. It's maybe long overdue, but here we are.
Here we are, right? So that's a silver lining to figuring these things out on the flip of a dime, right? Or during the pandemic. Where does VTS fall as it relates to real estate's relationship with tech?
So VTS really has become the bridge between the people doing the work in these buildings and the buildings themselves. It almost doesn't matter which category you look at, whether that's people actually getting into the buildings, where the software that helps them do that, whether it's information flow. So it's an industry that's really lived off of like gut instinct for many, many years. You've got really smart people with no information. Part of our job is to make sure they have that information, whether it's about their buildings or the market. And so we're kind of helping or have become that bridge between the people and the buildings.
So for example, what they do is what swipes when you come in. They can be able to, an example of, I guess, simplistic tech is, this is when we're really busy in the morning, this is when we're busy at night, and it helps them understand what resources they need at different levels of the day. So that's kind of some of the things that
one of the data sets is, are people coming back to the office?
Right.
If they are, which days? Are they using amenities in the building, which ones? So as we think about where do we invest as a building owner, we now have data to support that. You know, we know that in building A, the conference rooms and the kitchen get used every single day. Okay, build that in building B.
Right.
Where it used to be, I think this stuff gets used, well, let's spend $20 million on it. Not super efficient.
Right. So what is tech's role in combating the current challenges that the industry is seeing? I mean, vacancy rates, we're here in New York, we know what it looks like. People are maybe in 2-3 days a week. What types of solutions is VTS providing to address those challenges?
Yeah, so there's kind of two sides to the coin for us. One is just providing the software, which helps automate the job and make it easier for the person who's doing it. As a part of that, we spit out lots of information, right? So you talked about vacancy, for example. That's been a problem for probably 2 years now. The pandemic was a tough time for our space, you know, specifically, but we're now in a digital world, right? The way that people work is changing, so our job is to help people understand, given how people are working now, how do you even go to market with a new piece of vacant space, right? Because it's very different from 2019, right? They want different things, and so helping them understand that and then go to market digitally is different. We used to be in a very physical world where it was, I want to come tour that space in person. Now it's, I want to see it online first before I step out of my apartment. That might be not new for residential real estate, but for commercial, that is a new thing. And so it's almost bringing them into the new world in a lot of ways.
What trends have you seen so far in 2023 with the adoption of tech in the real estate industry, and how has it been impacted with current economic conditions?
Yeah, so I say two major trends. One is most of the tech has historically been for the building operators to make their job easier. Now, because the way that people work is actually changing, it's about giving new tech to the tenants in those buildings, which is a dramatic change from a couple years ago. The second big trend is consolidation, right? When markets change and budgets become really important and critical, it's about kind of shrinking your stack of things and doing more with less. And so we're seeing a lot of the largest owners in the world, like Brookfield or Blackstone, our big customers, want to do more with technology from less people. So it's, I want to do more, but I don't have the bandwidth or time to do it with 30 vendors. Or I'm going to pick the ones that I trust, the 3 or 4, and consolidate around them. And so it's, I think it's not just the dollars, it's the time that they're really trying to save.
What's next as it relates to tech and real estate? What do you think, even beyond 2023?
So I think, much like maybe the financial markets, right, you really have a pulse of what's happening in a market. There's lots of information. It's super transparent. Real estate's been super opaque. So part of our job has been to try to bring that opacity to the forefront and make it a more transparent market. And so an example of that is we launched about 1.5 years ago the first real-time index on the market called the VOTI, the VTS Office Demand Index. So now every month you can actually see how much new demand is entering every major market in the US. And so I think in a couple years it'll look more like Bloomberg than it does real estate today in terms of the amount of information we have access to. And so I think the biggest change, while it doesn't seem like a big change, is just transparency of data and how we use that to do everything in real estate. Lease new space for our company, buy a building, sell a building. It's not going to matter. You're going to have data for all of it, which is a big change from even today.
Well, that's interesting. Are there any trends that you have discerned from the index in terms of occupancy?
A lot of changes. It's funny, we have a new report coming out, I think tomorrow, our March data comes out. And I think what you'll see is that March was surprisingly better than we thought it would be. And so I don't want to give away too much because it comes out tomorrow.
Right.
But I think we're trying to figure out where's the bottom, right? Is this now an indication of we're close to the bottom? But what we're looking at really is our future data points. So we're tracking actual new companies in the market looking for space right now. So not a lease comp, which is a deal that got signed 9 months ago. That's old information.
Right.
We want to understand what's happening. And so I think what we're seeing is a lot of the cities that are still largely remote are struggling, right? San Francisco being probably number one. So the maybe tech-driven markets are a bit behind the ones who are maybe more financially oriented, like in New York. And so, is that going to balance out is the big question, but that's certainly been the trend.
Well, it's really interesting. If you had a more robust March and we're going through, I guess, somewhat of a downturn in the economic cycle, if it was more robust than you thought, that could bode well. We were talking about this off camera, but getting people back into the offices.
For sure. I think one of our, I don't call it a hunch, has been if there is a recessionary period, right? Because the Great Resignation is over. You can get a job anywhere. I think those days are long gone. And so does that put leverage back in the hands of the employer to say, we feel we're more productive and we'll be more successful if we're together, right? And so I think that as a CEO that is true. And so does that become maybe the catalyst for the restart of the office market? I think that's the big question we all want to see and are hopeful for, but time will tell.
All right, well, we'll have to keep tracking that index. Thanks so much for joining us, Nick.
Thanks for having me.
And thanks for joining us on Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq.